welcome back to another Outdoor Philosophy. And today we're going to be continuing our look at the book Working with Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman. And we are over halfway through now, and we are looking today at Chapter 9, which is Collaboration, Teams, and the Group IQ. And this one is, of course, all about collaborations and doing collaborations inside of a work environment. And this is something that probably isn't always a strength of mine. And I think one of the reasons it's not a strength of mine is that I am a chronic overachiever. And as a chronic overachiever, I generally don't want to work with a lot of other groups at times because it's not that I want to project the overachievement onto others. It's that sometimes I get frustrated when the return may not be the same. Now, that's not in all areas, and there are certainly some things I take a back seat to, but I can remember this one time we were doing group projects. It's my senior year in high school. By this point in time, a lot of people are looking at me like, this guy's the achiever or whatever, and I attract people into groups or teachers would put people in the groups. So think of your average high school class, and I'm this chronic overachiever at all the schoolwork, and your average high school student is not. And so I remember I was in this group with these guys. I can still remember all their names, and they were just expecting me to carry them along to a good A+ grade. And after I tried everything I could to let them contribute something, even if it wasn't the perfect standards, they still wouldn't want to do it. So I went to the teacher and I said, hey, you know what? These guys have been slacking off. I've been trying to help them along. I've been trying to be patient, whatever else, but they're not. Can I do this group project alone? She's like, sure, why not? So I did the group project alone. Now, some people might look at that and say, well, that's a bad thing. The lesson is to try and get people to to work together as groups. But the problem and the reality is not everybody wants to work together in groups. You will at times in your life get a team of people together who don't give a rip. They want to do the minimum amount possible and to get whatever they want to get. And that's not a good thing. Now, of course, this book, of course, is taking this chapter where it assumes that everyone wants to excel. And if, of course, you're reading a book like this, you probably want to excel, you want to learn, you want to grow, you want to improve. And that's all good and well, except when you have somebody else thrown into your group who doesn't read such books, who doesn't want to grow and improve, who just wants to punch the clock, do the minimum amount possible, and be done with it. And so that's where I start to have an issue with some of these things trying to teach us about collaboration and stuff like this, because not everybody is able to do that. On some people, it's because there's people that are overachievers, and on some end, it's because there's people that are perpetual and terminally lazy. How do you deal with that? And sadly, I don't think that this chapter deals with that. I think this chapter gives us more of these tips like, do these things and you're going to get your chronically, terminally lazy people on your side. And it ain't going to happen. But we're going to go ahead and go into this chapter anyway. So, of course, collaboration, teams, and group IQ, they give us all of these anecdotal stories about how socializing shapes the brain and socializing is what causes us to survive and all these. Maybe to a degree, some of that's true. Some of it, maybe not as much. Then they talk about the group mind. Of course, the proverb that they start the chapter with is I think it's the Japanese proverb, none of us are as smart as all of us, which is certainly true. In fact, there's a fascinating speech in the nutrition field by Tom Naughton. It's called Diet, Health, and the Wisdom of Crowds, which kind of talks about this a little bit, where he talks about crowds and the wisdom of crowds. That's it, Diet, Health, Wisdom of Crowds. And so he's talking about the fact that in the old school, in the old time, in the old days, what would end up happening is that some people would, and it is our modern thing, in diet, of course, is a diet talk. So he says, people would go to their doctor and their doctor would tell them what to do. And the doctor had these guidelines handed down, and it was just a straight path, a straight vertical up and down, the information coming down. In fact, there's another book he talks about in there called The Wisdom of the Anointed, where it basically talks about the people who are simply the wise, the professionals, the educated in the field. And they talk about this interplay between them, and he says no, the model of there's a few anointed elite that know what's right and then they have to pass it on, that's not exactly the good model versus this concept of when all of us are able to contribute, we are as a collective better. So I'm certainly not denigrating that part, because there's a lot of that is true. But they do take a lot more into this, trying to talk about the group. The group is so much better than the individual, which sometimes it can be, but I don't just jump on that bandwagon that the group is always better, blah, blah, blah. Because there's times that the group drags you down. There's times that the group forces you to conform in ways that you probably shouldn't be forced to conform to. And so that's kind of what we're talking about here. But regardless, they get into 3 different groups. Number 1 is building bonds, nurturing instrumental relationships. How do you nurture these relationships? Collaboration and cooperation, working with others towards shared goals. Okay, and then 3rd is team capabilities, creating synergy and working toward group goals. All right, so looking at this, number 1 is breaking bonds, nurturing instrumental relationships. So people with the ability to build bonds. Now, let's talk about this in concept of the Christian model of small groups. Churches have done away with Bible study and now are talking about small groups. And these small groups rarely bring up the Bible, which is very sad that these are church-sponsored events, not bringing up the Bible. But then what happens is some people try and force these groups. And the reality is you can't force groups. You have to organically build them. And there are certainly people who are better at organically building groups, and that's what he's talking about in these competencies. So people with the competency to build bonds, to build these groups, they can cultivate and maintain extensive informal networks. These are people that know a lot of folks. They're people who can interface back and forth, and whether it's from a business meeting or a social gathering or the golf course or the country club or whatever, they know a lot of different people. That's kind of what's at mind here. Number 2, they seek out relationships that are mutually beneficial. This is a good skill to have. It's good, here on YouTube, we can do collaborations with each other, where when we get together and collaborate with other people, then what can end up happening is, we'll introduce a new person to our crowd, they'll introduce a new person to their crowd, and synergy ensues, and the reality is the relationship is better for both parties. And then, of course, you can bounce back and forth. Like on my big channel, I do a lot of conversations in collaboration with Techlore, who is also in the privacy and security end. And so he and I can bounce stuff off each other with a whole lot less words than I can about other people who don't quite know as much about that topic. All right. 3rd is people with this competency build rapport and keep others in the loop. So they're people that have the ability to sit down and communicate effectively. And we talked about communication earlier. Communication is so important to make sure that you have this. And then they have the ability to actually keep the flow of communication going. And that's the important part. Next is people with the competency of building bonds. Next, they make and maintain personal friendships among work associates. This is an interesting one that, I'm part of several different, not several, but I'm part of a few different business groups and networking groups. And, the attempts to foster friendships, there's some people that do, but pretty much all of them is centered around drinking. And I don't drink. So this is kind of a difficult one at times, but it's possible to make good personal friendships among work associates. And the reality is, if you can learn to make good friendships among work associates, you enjoy going to work a little bit more because you're working with your friends rather than just working with your coworkers. And that's also a very important concept. So they talk about this this competency a little bit. They talk about social networks and personal capital. Of course, that's not social networks, what we think of social networking now. This book was written 10 years before Facebook hit the scene. So we're not talking about that type of social network. We're talking about networking in terms of other things. All right, so the next part of this is collaboration and cooperation. So collaboration and cooperation. So working with others toward shared goals. People with this competency have the ability to balance a focus on task with attention to relationships. All right, so they can direct this, they can build relationships, they can focus on this. This is what's important. Next, they collaborate, sharing plans, information, and resources. Okay, so in other words, this is the ability to easily share information back and forth in collaborations. This is very important anytime you want to do a collaboration, is that you, anytime you want to do a collaboration is that you have to be able to share information. You have to share resources. You have to share stuff like this. All right, and then promote a friendly and cooperative climate. This is important because without a friendly and cooperative climate, what can end up happening is people are forced to collaborate, but they don't really like it, and you get a much lower quality collaboration. But people who are good at collab, they have the ability to make it fun, make it friendly, make it enjoyable. And then spot and nurture opportunities for collaboration. And this is where, I reached out to Techlore the first time. We did a couple collaborations because I was like, our channels have something very close in common, and maybe we could do some communication together, which was pretty cool. And so I spotted that and then reached out, and then, we've never personally met, but we're pretty good friends at this point in time. We've done several different collaborations, several different group calls, things like that, and it worked out pretty well. And then, of course, the last part is the team capabilities. And this is the one where it's like, yeah, you heard the old expression, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him take a drink. This is kind of it. Like, you can't force a terminally lazy person to just automatically jump up. I don't care what kind of social skills you have. It's like, you just can't do it. All right, but we are looking at team capabilities, creating group synergy, and pursuing collective goals. So people with this competency, number one, model team qualities like respect, helpfulness, and cooperation. So there is obviously a person better at this. You can't just get a chronic jerk, throw them in a group and have them expect some type of collaboration. That's not really going to happen. But what we do see is that some people have the ability to foster respect and cooperation in groups. They'll ask questions. They'll draw out answers. They'll draw out skills and abilities. Drawing all members into active, enthusiastic participation. This is part of that, just drawing out individual people's strengths and weaknesses as they play out on the individual field. Number three, competence with this is building a team identity and commitment. This is something you can't always do. A lot of this boils down to the individual attitudes of the people, and you can't always change the attitudes. You can change your attitude. Maybe you can have a contagious part of a good, positive attitude, but you ultimately can't change somebody's attitude for them. And then finally, protect the group and its reputation and share credit. People don't want to just take all the credit for the thing and then walk off from there. They actually are going to give us, give the rest of the group, even downplaying their own purpose and role. A good leader will often downplay the purpose and the role of that. So that's kind of my thoughts on collaboration. I thought I'd end with one more fun collaboration story, because most of us, if we've been on this earth for a while, we've been to those hokey team building things, right? Where you go out and, it's the same things. Here's the balance beams and a board. How do you get everybody on your team over here? And it's big collaboration stuff. And I remember going to one of these when I first started grad school. Of course, they wanted to build the team above all of the people of the incoming class, which makes no sense, because once you get settled into your lab after the first semester, you don't see each other at all anyway. So, but anyway, they're like, we're going to go down to this place, so this team building exercise. And of course we go out. Now, I have a very interesting balance. It's because I'm a thinker. I think. I'm not just a sheeple, meh. I don't just follow the crowds. I use my thinking, I use my rationality, and I make decisions. And I have a good attitude about things. But we're out there, and I'm talking to the leader down there, and we're down there, and I'm just like, yeah, all right, whatever. And I don't know what exactly brought the conversation, but she said something like, oh, you don't think these are helpful? I said, no, I think this is hokey crap. I said, I'll have a good attitude and whatever else. And I didn't just have a bad attitude, sit in your back corner. No, I did what they wanted. I participated in all this kind of other whatever stuff, did all this kind of stuff. And at the end, she's like, oh, did you have a change in attitude? I said, no. I said, it's still hokey crap. I said, this doesn't do anything. It doesn't help our team. I'm probably not going to have any long-term relationship with any of these people anyway, unless they happen to be in the lab or next to it. In our case, I had one of the people in our incoming class was in the lab next to us, so we became friends, and we talked for a long time. I haven't talked to her for a while, but we chatted for a while because, we were on the same floor. We were, working in the same close quarters, and we became friends. And there were other people that, we had a few classes together, but didn't really see them after that. The ultimate thing is that you can't force this type of stuff to happen. And I don't care what type of competency you have. So I'm kind of calling balderdash on part of this individual chapter, because there's some skills that will help you do this kind of stuff, but at the end of the day, it comes down to the individual attitudes and the competencies of the people. Some people, like I said, I don't generally like to do a lot of collaboration because I feel like I get a lot more done without it. Now, that proposes a downside that I also have a difficult time delegating some tasks that could easily be delegated, and that's something I'm always working on. However, on the flip side of the coin, some people just aren't going to be good at collaboration because they're terminally lazy and simply will not set up. And if you try and sit there and goad them to do some work, all you're going to do is frustrate them and frustrate yourself. And so you always got to take this type of stuff with a mind, a competency, and a thinking reality. This book is not authored by God, so something to keep in mind. But overall, interesting chapter, interesting points. I'm not sure it necessarily helps in the long term of things, but it is what it is. So that's my thoughts. What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments down below.